Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, great to be here.
Today we're tackling something that's super important for all of us pet owners out there.
Absolutely.
It's pet emergency preparedness.
Yeah.
And to help us navigate this topic, we've got Tina Jin's book, First Saint Aid, 5 hilarious yet helpful ways to protect your pets in emergencies.
Great book.
And we've got this really interesting podcast episode that we listened to that kind of digs into the book and shares some real-life pet emergency stories. So if you're a pet owner and you've ever wondered what to do if your furry friend gets into a jam,
Right.
then this deep dive is definitely for you.
It's for you.
So, it's easy to think like, oh, that'll never happen to me. But the reality is emergencies can happen anywhere, anytime.
They do happen.
The podcast actually uses those devastating fires in Los Angeles back in January 2025 as a stark example of just how unprepared many pet owners were.
Unfortunate. Yeah, and it led to some, truly heartbreaking outcomes for both pets and their humans.
Yeah. It's a sobering reminder that we need to be proactive.
Absolutely we do.
So where do we even begin?
Yeah.
The book has this catchy term, bark bag or meow kit.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
So what exactly should we be packing in these things?
Well, it's more than just tossing in some kibble and a chew toy, Yeah. You really need to think about what your pet would absolutely need to survive for at least 3 days if you were separated.
Okay.
So that means food and water, of course, but also any medications they take.
Okay.
Copies of their vet records.
Gotcha.
A sturdy leash.
Okay.
A collar with ID tags. And a first aid kit.
Hold on. A pet first aid kit?
Yes.
I wouldn't even know where to begin with that.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff goes in there?
That's a great question, and I think we should probably dedicate some time to that a little bit later in the deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, just know that it's very different from a human first aid kit.
Okay.
Pets have very different needs, and you need to be prepared for things like cuts and scrapes and burns.
Yeah.
Or even potential poisoning.
Okay, so we've got the survival basics covered.
Right.
What else are we missing?
2 things.
Okay.
A comfort item.
Okay.
Something familiar that will help reduce your pet's stress levels.
Oh, okay.
Think a favorite blanket or a toy or even an old t-shirt that smells like you.
Uh-huh.
And here's one you might not think of: a recent photo of your pet.
A photo? Why a photo?
Well, just imagine, worst case scenario, your pet gets separated from you during the chaos of an evacuation.
Right.
Having that clear recent photo could be invaluable for identification.
Oh.
And for creating lost pet flyers or online posts.
That's a really good point. I'm definitely adding that to my list.
Yeah, it's like giving them a fighting chance to find their way back home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Tina Jin also mentioned something in her blog about rotating the food in the bark bag.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Well, you wouldn't want to grab your pet's emergency kit only to find that the food expired a year ago.
Right.
It's all about being truly prepared, and that means checking expiration dates and making sure everything is fresh and ready to go.
So just like we have fire drills, it's a good idea to do a kit check every few months.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, let's be honest. Not all pets are going to be thrilled about being tacked up and moved.
No.
Especially cats.
Especially cats.
Getting them into a carrier can feel like a wrestling match, even on a good day.
Oh, you're telling me?
So, but Tina has some great advice in First Saint Aid about making the carrier a less scary place.
Yeah.
So instead of it being this mysterious thing that only comes out for vet visits,
Right.
leave it out in the open toss in some treats.
Yeah.
Some catnip, maybe a comfy blanket, and let your cat explore it at their own pace.
Exactly. It's all about turning the carrier into a safe space.
Yeah.
And not a symbol of impending doom.
That makes total sense. And what about when it actually comes time to evacuate? Any tips for getting a reluctant feline into the carrier?
Well, short of calling in a team of cat wranglers,
Right.
Tina actually recommends something called the laser pointer trick.
Okay.
Basically, you use the laser pointer to lure your cat into the carrier, taking advantage of their natural hunting instincts.
That's brilliant.
Right.
Way more humane than trying to stuff a panicked cat into a carrier.
Oh, yeah.
Which, speaking from experience, never ends well.
No, never.
So speaking of making things easier during an evacuation, Tina had another tip about cat carriers that I found really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
She suggests considering a top-loading carrier.
Yes.
Especially for cats who tend to, how shall we say, spread eagle themselves when they sense danger.
Yeah.
Wait, spread eagle? I'm not sure I've heard that one before.
Like when they flatten their bodies and extend their legs outward, making themselves as wide as possible to avoid being put into the carrier.
Ah, got it. Like they turn into like furry starfish clinging to anything they can get their claws on.
Exactly.
Yeah. But why is a top-loading carrier better in those situations?
Well, with a traditional front-loading carrier, you often have to kind of maneuver a resisting cat
Huh.
through a small opening,
Right.
which can be stressful for both of you.
Yeah.
But with a top-loading carrier, you can gently lower them in from above,
Yeah.
which could be a lot less traumatic.
That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, anything that reduces stress during an emergency is a win in my book.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about getting ourselves and our pets out safely.
Yeah.
What about the logistics once you're out?
Right.
The podcast mentioned some issues with pet-friendly evacuation centers.
Yes, that's a really crucial point that often gets overlooked.
Okay.
During the LA fires, many pet owners found themselves scrambling to find shelters that would accommodate their animals.
Oh, wow. So what can we do to be proactive on that front?
I would say do your research ahead of time.
Okay.
Identify which shelters in your area are pet-friendly.
Gotcha.
And even more importantly, have a backup plan.
Like,
Maybe a friend or family member outside the immediate area who could take your pet in a pinch.
okay, so kind of like a network.
Exactly. And the podcast had this great term for it.
Okay.
They called it a pet nanny network.
Pet nanny network. I love that.
Yeah,
It's like having a built-in support system for your furry friends.
exactly. And speaking of support systems, don't forget about the wealth of information available online.
Right.
There are tons of websites and forums and even social media groups dedicated to pet preparedness.
It's almost like there's a whole community of pet owners out there who are just as passionate about keeping their furry family members safe as we are.
Absolutely. And they can be a fantastic resource for everything.
Yeah.
From packing lists to first aid tips to finding pet-friendly lodging and connecting with local rescue organizations.
You know, I have to admit, when I first started thinking about this whole pet emergency preparedness thing,
Yeah,
it felt kind of overwhelming.
right.
But the way you and Tina Ginn break it down, it makes it feel much more manageable.
It's all about taking it one step at a time.
You know, you don't have to do everything all at once.
Right.
Maybe this week you focus on putting together your pet's emergency kit.
Mm-hmm.
And next week you research pet-friendly shelters in your area.
Small, achievable steps. I
Yeah.
like that.
And honestly, a little humor goes a long way too.
Oh, absolutely.
The podcast shared some hilarious pet emergency stories that had me laughing out loud.
Oh my gosh, me too. Like the one about the dog who ate an entire box of crayons.
Yes.
And ended up looking like a walking rainbow for days.
for days.
Or the parrot who learned to scream fire during a smoke detector test, sending the neighbors into a panic.
Oh my goodness.
And those stories are funny,
Yeah.
but they also serve as important reminders.
Absolutely.
Like that crayon-eating dog.
Uh-huh.
What if those crayons had been toxic?
Right.
Having that pet first aid kit and your vet's contact info handy could be a lifesaver in those situations.
Absolutely. And brings us back to why we're doing all of this in the first place. We love our pets, and we want to keep them safe even when the unexpected happens.
And sometimes a little humor can help us navigate those stressful situations. And remember that even in the midst of chaos, there's still joy to be found in our furry companions.
Exactly.
Speaking of joy, the podcast had this really fun segment where they asked listeners some thought-provoking questions.
I love that.
I love that too.
Yeah.
It was a great way to get people thinking about their pets' unique personalities and how they might react in different scenarios.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of the specific questions?
I do.
I'd love to throw them out to our listener and get them thinking too.
Okay, let me see. Oh, I remember one that really got me thinking.
Okay.
It was, if you had to evacuate with your pets, what's the one item you'd grab, no questions asked?
Oh, that is a tough one for me. It would probably be my dog's favorite squeaky toy.
Ah.
It's his absolute favorite thing in the world, and I know it would help keep him calm and entertained in a stressful situation.
That's a sweet choice.
Okay.
I think for me it would be my cat's special blanket.
She loves to snuggle up in it, and it would provide her with a sense of familiarity and comfort in a new environment.
Okay, that's one item down. What other questions did they ask? Okay, so we've got our go-to comfort item figured out. What were some of the other questions from the podcast?
Well, here's one that I think every pet owner should consider. Do you think your dog would actually listen to evacuation commands, or would they try to save the couch cushions first?
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious
Right.
and so true. It
Yeah.
really makes you think about your pet's instincts and priorities in a crisis.
Right.
Would they understand the gravity of the situation, or would they be more focused on rescuing their favorite chew toy?
Exactly.
Or in my dog's case, an empty Amazon box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even with all the preparation in the world, our pets are still going to be individuals with their own quirks and reactions.
Right.
And speaking of unpredictable reactions, they also asked, how would you explain stop, drop, and roll to a cat?
Ha! No, that is a challenge I'm not sure even Tina Jin could solve. Cats are notoriously independent,
Yeah,
and trying to get them to follow those instructions would probably be a recipe for disaster,
well,
or at least a viral video.
exactly. And honestly, that question highlights another important aspect of pet emergency preparedness.
Okay.
Having realistic expectations,
Right.
we could do everything right,
Uh-huh.
have all the supplies, practice the drills,
Yeah.
but we also need to be prepared for the unexpected.
Right.
And sometimes that means accepting that our pets might not react the way we hope they would.
That's a great point. It's all about being flexible, adaptable, and maybe having a good sense of humor to get through those tricky moments.
Absolutely.
Did they have any other questions that really stood out to you?
Oh, there was one that really stumped me. Would you rather give first aid to a squirrel on caffeine or a cat on catnip? And why?
Ooh, that's a toughie. A caffeinated squirrel sounds like a recipe for chaos and bites.
Yes.
But a cat on catnip could be equally unpredictable with those zoomies and head boops.
Right.
I think I'd have to go with the cat. At least there's a chance of some affection in between the craziness. What about you?
You know, that's the beauty of those questions. There's no right or wrong answer. They're just meant to get you thinking and spark conversations.
Right.
And I think that's something that Tina Ginn does really well in First Saying Aid.
Yeah.
She manages to take a potentially scary and overwhelming topic and make it engaging, even funny at times.
Absolutely. And the podcast did a great job of expanding on that approach, too.
Yeah.
They actually framed pet emergency preparedness as a form of self-care, which I thought was really interesting.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It's so true. By taking the time to prepare, we're not only protecting our pets, but we're also reducing our own anxiety and stress,
Right.
knowing that we've done everything we can to keep them safe.
It takes the pressure off, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't control everything, but we
Yeah.
can control how prepared we are.
Exactly.
And honestly, that peace of mind is priceless.
It is.
So to wrap things up, what are the key takeaways you want our listener to walk away with today?
Well, first and foremost, know that pet emergencies can happen to anyone,
Right.
but being prepared can make a world of difference.
Yeah.
Start by creating that bark bag or meow kit. Research pet-friendly shelters in your area.
Okay.
Build your pet nanny network.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to tap into those online resources and communities.
Right.
And remember, it's a journey, not a race.
Take it one step at a time, inject some humor into the process, and know that you're not alone in this.
Absolutely.
And if you're looking for a hilarious and insightful guide to get you started,
Uh-huh.
definitely check out Tina Jin's book, First Saying Aid: 5 hilarious yet helpful ways to protect your pets in emergencies. It's packed with practical tips, funny anecdotes, and everything you need to know to be the best prepared pet parent you can be.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey of pet emergency preparedness. We hope you learned something new, had a few laughs along the way, and feel empowered to take action to protect your furry family members. Until next time, stay curious and stay prepared.
And give those furry friends an extra cuddle from us.
Yeah.